Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
Welcome to the Love Haze podcast, where we believe that healing and wholeness are not just destinations.
That's right. We believe they're a journey, y'all. And here on the Love Haze, we talk about how to navigate through it. So today, we are going to talk about reciprocity in relationships. We have unpacked before matching energy, communication styles, conflict resolution, and now we want to spend a little bit of time talking about a different approach to unbalanced relationships. Welcome back to our Black Love Journey. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
All right, Mr. Hayes. What is this? Why are we talking about this? Where did it come from?
So I follow a couple different pastors and speakers, folks who consider themselves healers, and folks who talk a lot about relationships. One of the folks that I follow is Pastor YPJ. And this week, he was talking about the fact that he said all lopsided relationships will eventually collapse. And that locked me in right there. But then he went on to say that some of the things that we do, the reason for lopsided relationships is sometimes because of the position that we put people in.
Yeah.
And we go into relationships at times expecting ourselves out of people or putting people in position based on the fact that we just like them and that there's a part of the responsibility that we play for the position that we put people in.
Yeah.
And having this idea that if something is lopsided from the start, then it can't survive. And so he really just turned it inward and said, what responsibility do I play in putting this person in position that maybe they weren't ready to hold in my life? Do they have the capacity to be there? And so, I have really been resonating for myself with doing the internal work and not being a person who blames. And so I just wanted to have more conversation about the responsibility we play in discarding people sometimes when it is us that have put them in a position not necessarily that they asked for.
Yeah, I think there's so much that I'm even reflecting on. It's not even that what someone's asked for. I think about the label of like best friend. What does it mean to be a best friend? And there are certain expectations that come with that. That's why lately I've been like, should we even be using that at this age? Because it's like so many, like adulthood offers too many pressures already. So then to have this, like, I'm this person's best friend or they're my best friend, which means they should be showing up in this way. Right. But really, what if they just don't have the capacity to show up that way? It's bringing up for me, around our engagement and our wedding, like lots of conversations around this. And people at the time were saying things like, they were saying this, but in a different way. Like everyone doesn't deserve a front seat in your life.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean that they don't need to be in your life, but maybe it is from afar, from a little further. So I think that there's just so many levels and layers, I guess, to this. I'm really glad that we're spending a little bit of time unpacking all of it, because there's just, even as you're explaining it, I'm kind of like, oh, this is how I feel about that, and this is how I feel about this. So let's start. Like, what constitutes a lopsided relationship to begin with, in your opinion?
And from my standpoint, it is one where you are carrying the majority of the relationship, and there is this much expectation of you and this much expectation of the other person. And a relationship that exists in that way kind of is like on a slope, right? So if I put anything of substance on that relationship, then it slides down. It can't hold anything up if it is lopsided at all times. So lopsided relationships, they can't survive because I'll end up believing that I am doing everything, or I'm carrying this relationship, I'm carrying this friendship. And that's what it is for me. But I guess the topic at hand is like, how much of a role do I play in that piece of it? But what does it constitute for you?
I'm over here thinking like, how do they even get there? So I agree with your definition. It just means that someone is giving more. And the other part that comes up to me is like, it's just, there's a spectrum for most things, right? I hate to use the word fluid, but it feels a little bit like that, because at some point at the beginning of the relationship, things probably were a certain way that worked for both parties. And so then how does it get to a point where you're feeling like this is now lopsided, or I'm giving more than the other person? And then what are the circumstances that would cause that? Because there is no relationship, in my opinion, that is 50-50, 100% of the time, right? And so is something going on in that person's life and this is all they're able to do? Or is what we're talking about where it's a pattern, where this is actually how the person shows up regardless of the circumstance, and that doesn't work for us? And if it's that one, how did it get there? Like what part did we play in it starting that way? I don't know. I just have more questions than answers, I guess.
So for me, I think that more than anything, relationships, of course, are nuanced, right? And so I do believe that there are periods of time in relationship where there will be this idea that everything is not going to be 50-50. There will be times when, I have a little bit more to give and, I can fill in and be there for you. You're going through life changes. And that is really what brings me into friendship with people. A lot of times this idea of, there will be balance here. There is something that we can glean from each other. And there will be times when I can't give as much and times when you can't give as much. And then, that kind of balances out. But friendships that are and relationships that are lopsided, that are always lopsided, like I always got to be the person to reach out. I always got to be the person to show up for you. And you may or may not come, depending on how you feel or what you got going on over here. And people who kind of treat you like you are a convenience. And I think the nuance for me comes in that I believe that relationships go through seasons, just like intimate partnerships do. There will be times when I'm not able to show up for you in the way that I have in the past, right? And I think that, like you were alluding to a little bit earlier, we at this big old age, and I don't know that we have any business calling people best friends. I believe that our higher power gives us what we need in the season that we may be in at the time. And that doesn't mean that we have to discard anyone else. And I think that's also what resonated with me the most about what Pastor YPJ was saying. It is about where we position people in our lives, right? And not, I fell out with them because we're not as close and you don't know what that person may be experiencing.
It also gets more nuanced when you start talking about family, because there are these societal expectations on what it means to be a mother, a brother, sister, uncle, grandparent. And so then what happens if the unbalanced relationship is like your mama, right? Like, so then what does that mean? Because clearly, I mean, there are people that have really I don't want to say cut off. Yeah, I guess cut off their families because the relationships have been that toxic and it was for their own peace and health that they had to do that. But when it comes to repositioning, which is essentially what we're getting to here is there's just so many layers to it. And it is so incredibly nuanced.
It is. And it really is about, for me, my internal struggle had been how to find selflessness, right? And also have the ability to have selfishness and not feel bad
about boundaries.
Having boundaries, being a good friend, a good brother, a good son, all those things, finding my selflessness in that, but also having some level of selfishness where I have my boundaries and say, no, wait a minute, that's it, right? And a part of the work that I've been more willing to do with my family and not discarding my family is like having better boundaries with them and being able to say what I will and won't do and repositioning some things in my relationships with my family and just like not having this expectation of them to do certain things because I don't know that they have the capacity. One great example for me is this past week, we were just having a conversation about the difference between how support looks from my mother and how it looks from your mother. Maybe not either one bad or good, right? Just different. And what I realize is I love the way that your mother prays for us and she intercedes on our behalf and she calls and she tells us all those things. My mother may pray for us and do all these other things. That's not how she shows up. I think she has her own history and own relationship and own traumas that have caused her to like always be bracing for what may be the
Mm.
worst thing that happens. And a part of what I've had to talk through in therapy, and what I had to talk through in therapy as recently as yesterday, was like, people show up based on how they
Yeah.
have learned to operate with their own stuff.
Yeah.
And so my mother, at my big age of 45, she shows up ready to protect her child, right? And ready to prepare you for what the world may be throwing at you, right? And your mother shows up like, we praying, this is what we're doing. And my mother shows up bracing for the worst. And it doesn't make her a bad person. I just am learning what position I have to put those two things in. Because I love both relationships. And it is about how my faith meets that in the intersectionality there in the dynamic of those relationships. I have to figure out where to place people without falling out with them.
Yeah. And why would you say that reciprocity is so important for the health of for a healthy relationship, or do you even believe that?
I definitely believe that reciprocity is important. I think that what I've learned is that reciprocity doesn't always have to look like exactly what I gave you.
Right, transactional.
Right.
Tit for
It
tat,
doesn't look like, okay, I was this for you, so now you need to be that for me.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been that for me, then you suck as a person.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what reciprocity is. And I think that we have to understand that, relationship and getting to know a person is something that's ongoing, because we grow and we change and our needs are different and all those things. And there will be times when people have to shift my role around in their lives based on what they need at the moment. And I appreciate the fact that I can look back and say that I have friends from college that I've been friends with for 20, 25 years. We're not as close as we used to be, right? But they are still my friends. At one point in my life, they were the people who were, due to life circumstance, due to proximity, due to all of those things, those were the closest people to me, the people that I did everything with, the people who knew where all the bodies were buried and supported me through that. And now that they live in wherever they live, America, doesn't mean that, we're not still friends. It means that I have people here who have that proximity, have that ability to be in the same space and go through things in the same way. And I ain't got to throw people away just because in this season it looks different.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we all need to have the ability to be able to shift as we need to and go through seasons without getting rid of folks.
Yeah, we say that now, but I do believe that there are some instances where, like, to the point of how that video actually starts, his very first line is lopsided relationships collapse. It's inevitable. And so I don't know, I'm thinking through, there is an end for all things, right? So there could just be seasons for certain relationships. And I guess he starts the video with that, and then he eventually works his way to essentially, what part did we play in that dynamic? And then how do we just reposition the person instead of throwing them away? Which is kind of actually counter to the whole idea that they collapsed to begin with. So there is, I guess I'm trying to navigate through the gray area of it. I'm a person that is very like black or white, like yes or no, right or left, right or wrong. And I'm still just trying to understand the nuances of it. So like how does, and I don't know if we're getting out of order here, what does that even look like if we were to apply it to an actual relationship? Let's say we have a friendship, you've been friends for years and years, and all of a sudden, because somebody changes, the dynamics don't work anymore. So let's say we're the person that's changed. This relationship, the dynamics of it isn't working anymore. How do then we start? What does repositioning look like? And I don't know if we're already getting to the navigating the haze of it, but do you know what I mean? Like, what does that even look like?
I think it can look different for different people, of course, but I think, understanding that you may have changed. I may have to take you out of the position where I have put some weight on you or some expectation on you for you to be able to be this thing in my life in this moment. Right? Because we were talking about earlier, like if I put anything that is any pressure on this relationship that's lopsided, then it slides to the floor because you're not able to rise to the occasion that I need you to rise to.
Yeah.
Right. And if it is consistently that you're not able to do that, then I need to put you over here. Right. Still in my circle, still in my friendship, and position someone else over here who's able to rise to the occasion and help me elevate to what it is that I need. Doesn't mean that, I'm done with you. Just for right now, you can't be in this position that I need in order for this relationship to have some balance, because I need to be able to move forward with what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. I need to have people in my circle who are able to help me elevate and go to the next level, right?
Yeah.
I hope that I am that for someone else as well. But if you are not able to rise to the occasion in that moment, it does not mean that I stay stagnant and allow that relationship to remain lopsided. For me, it means that someone else or some other relationship comes in that moment, and somebody else who is able to help me get to the level that I'm trying to get to comes in. We get there together. Hopefully I support them and they support me. And then that's how we move. But it is a certain level of fluidity, I think, that we need to be able to move around without dropping people out of our lives altogether. Because in that moment, in that season, that may be what that person needs to be for you, or what they can't be for you. It doesn't mean that like I'm done with you because you can't be everything that I needed right now. Right. And I think sometimes we believe, and we come from this culture of like, well, I did all this stuff for you, and here I am in my season of need, and you can't do it for me. So, I'm done with you. This sucks. We don't have to be friends anymore. Right. And I don't think we have to do people like that.
We don't. There are a couple things I'm thinking on this. So one, don't lose the thought is going away, because as you were talking, I was like, okay, yes. Okay, so I guess here's the thought. I hear you. And how is it? Are you having a conversation to say, hey, this is what I need, and instead that feels a little harsh? Or are you just acting accordingly? So like, instead of me going to this person all the time for these types of conversations or this type of vulnerability or support, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And you just change your behavior. So is it a change behavior, and is it a conversation? And then to the last point that you were making, I think if it were a case of at the first instance of someone just not being available for what you need, then you're trying to discard them, yes, that's too harsh. But if it's a pattern of behavior, like this person consistently shows up that way, to me, that feels more like, it's time to actually move them around. I've actually had conversations with friends before where I've just pointed out, I've written, I guess I am a little notorious for writing a letter.
Yeah.
But with words help me get things out, like everything I need to say. I can make every single point in writing, versus sometimes if I'm talking it out, I'll forget and I'll be like, oh man, I meant to say that thing. But I've sent letters to friends before where I've been like, I noticed this is how you show up with other friends. This person can steal from you. You still kick it with them. You like X, Y, and Z, laid out very specific facts. And then this is how you show up with me. And now I just want to let you know that I'm just going to match your energy. And so if you're not reaching out to me, I'm not reaching out to you, and whatever. And I've had a friend say, oh my gosh, you're so right. I can't believe I've been showing up that way, and I'm going to do better. They didn't. And we're not really friends anymore. But I appreciated the acknowledgement. Like, you know what? You're right. And then I've done it to a friend before, and it was like crickets. And it was like,
that's it. So I believe, to your first point, I believe that everything is worth a conversation.
Yes.
And you are notorious for saying people need to use their words.
Yes.
Right. I think that we need to tell people what it is that we need in relationship, and allow them to decide, or give them a chance to be able to show up in that way. And if they can't, then it's okay. This is specific for me with the example that I gave with my mom. Like, I've told my mom multiple times, like, hey, this is what our faith walk looks like for us. Right. I would love if you could join your prayers with ours.
Even the same language. Like, this is the language we're
Right.
praying with. Yeah.
And what I've learned is that my mother doesn't have the capacity sometimes to be able to do that.
Mm.
It's not her faith walk. That's not the way she lives her life.
Mm.
And I used to get so frustrated with her because she's just sometimes doom and gloom. You know, are you prepared for this other thing if this doesn't happen? And I'm saying to her, like, our faith walk looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm trying to push her into this thing that is not who she is, and being upset with her that she isn't that. So my duty in that moment, what I have to do with my mother, is not stop loving her, not discard her, right? But to be able to understand that there's limited information I can give her about our faith walk in the way that we decide to show up. And also, I will give her the necessary information so she can pray for her child in the way that she wants to. But I will not receive the other part of it that is doom and gloom and preparing for the worst and that kind of stuff, because that is not my walk. And if she wants her life to look any different, then that is her work to do.
Yeah.
But I get to decide that I'm going to put her right here. I love you still, but I am praying with people and talking with people who are able to join their faith with our faith and affirm in that way. Right? Because I do believe that the prayers of the righteous availeth much, and people who are able to join with us in prayer are able to get something through. My mother has her walk and her love for her child, and she is able to do that in the way that she wants to. But I'm able to say, this is lopsided, right? Because our faith walk doesn't look the same. And even though you love me in this way, not right now. I need somebody who is, you know, equal with my faith. And so that we can walk together.
Yeah.
You know, because if we are walking and your faith is down here and mine is up here, then I'm pulling you. Right. And I already got this thing going on. So I can't, that's not helpful for me. It doesn't mean I love you any less. It's just, you got your own work to do. And I don't know if you want to do it or not, but I don't have to meet you down here because that's where you are. If it works for you, fine. But in this moment, I need somebody who can get a prayer through. I need somebody who can say, I know what it looks like, but our faith looks like this. You know? And so I've had to fight so much against like how that has shown up in my life and how much of that I have already brought into my spirit in 44 years, just of that teaching, just of those limiting beliefs kind of stuff. And it's always easier when you can brace for the blow, right? But faith doesn't look like that for me in my life. I don't always want to be bracing for the blow. I want to be preparing for my greater, not bracing for defeat all the time. And I've just done so much work to get out of that I won't go back to that life.
You shouldn't.
You know, and that's what it looks like for me. I love her, you know, love other people in our lives dearly as well, but I can't go down there to meet them.
I feel like you just preached a whole sermon. I just want to sit in this moment for it. You see me about to start my little church
you start
walk.
rocking.
It's like, you better, okay, all right. Somebody pass the plate, please. So then what's the haze in all of this? So then I don't think I was out of order before. What we were doing is painting a picture of what redirection looks like. So now let's talk about what's the haze of that. Like what would make it difficult to address that? And I guess I can start us off by saying messing up the dynamics, especially when you have a history of people pleasing, like I have, that
both of us,
that can be difficult, you know, to set a different standard. I say use my words all the time, but actually using them can be difficult or a little uncomfortable because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. Nobody, I think, wants to just be beefing with somebody else. You just want to be loved and in a relationship in a way that works for you. So even speaking up and using your words, I think, can be difficult. Or I think another haze could be that, what if it's somebody that you really, really like and just wish they would show up a certain way? So like, what if it's a romantic relationship and like, gosh, this person just, there is no reciprocity. It's a pattern. I really, really like them. I thought this could be something, but I'm just going to have to move around and act accordingly. Like, so just, I think taking the steps to face the situation and then use your words, I think is the haze. What would you add there?
I think the haze is not wanting to disappoint people.
Yeah.
The haze is that relationships are un, unwritten. Like it's not. It is something that is actively happening.
Yeah.
Right. You know, since I started my therapy journey, um, there have been times when I've had to go back in relationship and say that this thing that maybe I have been doing for 15 years no longer works for me.
Yeah.
The haze of it is understanding that people won't always be able to understand the shift.
Because sometimes we don't even understand ourselves. Like it'll
Right.
be a minute before I'm like, wait, I noticed that I'm different.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's real.
And I understand about myself that I've had some toxic traits that have contributed to some of these friendships that I've had for a really long time.
Mm,
You know,
like
have this
what?
toxic trait of just being there for people and being whatever they need sometimes in the moment.
Mm,
We were talking about dating on our last episode and how I had the ability to be this chameleon, right?
mm,
Just if a woman wanted that, I can be that,
mm.
right? I can do that, right? If you
No,
like
now you
it,
know a
I
little
can
bit.
do it, right? Now, no, right? But whatever it is that you want or you desire in a friend, then I can be that. And I ended up being a friend to all of these people who didn't know how to be a friend to me,
Mm.
right? And that was my toxic trait. I didn't need anything.
Or so
Mm.
you projected.
Or so I thought I thought that was what being a good friend looked
Uh,
like to be selfless, just selfless, 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 and everybody will love you, right? And what it was is people put me in a position to be the person who like could receive everything they needed to dump. And people went and gave the best parts of themselves to other folk. And
mhm,
I was the dumping place.
mm,
The role that I play in that is I position myself
mhm,
as a fucking landfill
mm,
that could receive all of the trash
yeah,
and that you didn't have to clean.
yeah,
Right? It was a place for you to go to dump. And that was what I was to people. And
mhm,
so when I started having boundaries and, you know, people started calling and being like, hey, I really need to talk to you. And I would be like, no.
yeah,
You know, call me when you come to Atlanta and come kick it with your friends. You don't do none of that stuff. You call me when that has gone bad and you need somewhere to dump. So
mhm,
you can take the best parts of you and then go give them to somebody else. Yes, that my toxic trait had been that I had been that. But
mhm,
now there is time for a shift, and that's the work that I know about myself. But understanding that those people may then find their exit and say, well, I don't want to show up for you in that way.
okay.
Like I got enough over here.
You need to find a therapist anyway. So
You gotta stop telling
that's
me.
what they were using you as, basically.
Yeah, but you know, we are when we position people in our lives, we position them based on what it is that we can give and
Mhm,
also what it is that we can receive. You know, we do that unconsciously sometimes, but this is a person that I can really like be myself with
mhm,
and not feel like I have to show up and be anybody other than I can cry, I can do this. And, you know, to some degree, that's a good thing. But then can I also do that for them? And also, is it required? You know,
mhm,
what do I have to do when I look at, you know, a job that I may be wanting to get? Like, what do I have to extend to this place? And what can I get from this place?
mhm,
I know I'm going to get paid, but what skill set do I have to contribute there?
mhm.
And to get paid, I'm not going to give them all of me. I'm going to do what is required of that job,
Yeah.
right? In friendship, in relationship, most people show up and they do what is required. And if you don't require anything, then that is the part of it that belongs to you. You
Mm.
have to require something different and then allow people to show up. Because if you don't, then you can't be out here just throwing people away because they ain't show up when you ain't tell them that there was anything required.
Mhm,
You know, we have to do something different.
mhm, mhm.
Tell me what it is that you've learned about maintaining healthy relationships.
Did we navigate those hazes? We wanna You think there's anything there?
About navigating the haze itself. Um, I think giving yourself permission to like for me, it is giving myself, and I'm sorry, I have to go back and use my I statements, right?
Mhm.
So for me, it is going back and giving myself permission to say what it is that I need in relationship and be free to move people around and not just be accepting of people just showing up in my space and just giving me whatever it is that they have. So to me, like a part of the haze and navigating the haze for this particular subject matter, they kind of go together a little bit, if will, because it's hard. Because there is this feeling of rejection that may go there.
Mhm.
And I think what I've learned about the haze of it and navigating that haze is, when people can't show up for you in the way that you need, um, they don't belong to you. They're not yours, right? I had a frat brother of mine saying one time, "Ain't nobody ever lost a friend."
Mhm.
You never lost a friend. A friend that is your friend is your friend.
Yeah.
You don't lose friendships.
Mhm.
And what it is that we come to realizations that people may not be for us. And no, we don't want to be people who throw people away. But for the most part, if you give people expectations and tell them what it is that you need from them, even when you reposition them, that
Mhm.
repositioning will cause them to tell you everything that you need to know about that relationship.
Mhm.
And navigating that haze is being able to accept whatever the answer may be
Mm.
that comes out of the repositioning.
I would definitely say that's a haze and and how to navigate it. Like,
Hmm.
because to my example where the situation where I shared how I was feeling and it was met with silence, like
Hmm.
ignored, then the relationship, sort of disintegrated from there. That was the answer.
Hmm.
And that was really a really hard pill to swallow because this is someone I had been friends with for, 20 plus 30 years almost.
Yeah.
And so that is difficult. And I think to your question about what I've learned, I think what I've learned is also like you were saying, part of how to navigate it. What I've learned is that I could do a better job of setting my expectations or saying what I need earlier on and not waiting till things fester and I just can't take it anymore before I say
Hmm.
something. Now, in my defense, I was not at the place that I was then that I am now in
Yeah.
terms of courage, choosing myself. I had not been to
Yes.
therapy and done that type of work, and I was still very much in people pleasing. So,
Hmm.
on one hand, I actually applaud myself for even saying something while I was still such a people pleaser in those moments,
Hmm.
right? And so what I've learned and also how to navigate the haze is like I I need to learn how to choose myself more earlier and
Hmm.
learn how to verbalize that and say what I need in a way that is with love and in kindness and just kind of like, you know, set the tone so that that person can have the keys to
Hmm.
success and relationship with me.
Hmm.
How to do that sooner, how to do
Hmm.
that also more organically,
Hmm.
like how do you do it so that it doesn't feel like, hey, we need to have a talk, or
Yeah.
like it
Hmm.
doesn't feel like it's got to be such a heavy weighty thing. And maybe how do you work it into a conversation so that it's like, hey, this is actually what works for me. Like
Yeah.
so that it's not like we just had to sit down and I just brought you into the principal's office. So
Hmm.
both of those things. How do I choose myself more subtly so that, you know, we just have a mutual understanding, I think is what I've learned, and also a way to kind of navigate that haze.
We both kind of gave examples about how we didn't used to show up in that way. How since being involved with therapy, we show up and learning more about choosing ourselves, and
Mhm.
it is almost, to me, we were talking a little bit about jobs and stuff a minute ago,
Mhm.
almost like how I used to be entry level job,
Mm.
right? I
Mhm.
show up and I just wanted a job. I was fresh out of school, like hire me, hire me, hire me. I could be anything you want me to be. Like, yeah, yeah, I do that. Like 75 words a minute.
Yeah.
I could do all of that. Oh, y'all do that? You need
Yeah.
somebody to take out? I'll clean up the break room area on Friday. Yeah, I'll do that. Whatever you need to get me in the door. At 20 plus years being a social worker, if I show up to a job interview, I have all the questions for you.
Mhm.
Is this a goodness of fit for me?
Yes.
I am no longer entry level. I
Mhm.
have all these years of experience. Why did the last person leave this place?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the challenges that you have in this position?
What are the
Right.
expectations? What does it look like to be successful here?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the type of questions that grown folk ask.
Mm-hmm.
When you know your worth,
Mm-hmm.
those are the types of questions you ask before you get into relationship.
Yep. Yep.
Whether that be friendship, whether that be intimate partnership, whether that be a working relationship.
Yep.
How come people don't stay here? Right? What is it about this environment that says, I welcome you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are the types of questions that I ask employers now. Those are the types of questions that I ask people who are getting ready to come in a relationship with me or friendship with me or business relationship. Like, how is it that you operate?
Yeah.
You know, and those are questions that we didn't ask before, or I didn't ask before because I just wanted a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I could be whatever it is that you need in order to make this friendship go. And that's not who I am anymore. And now I navigate relationships a little bit differently because it's important to me because this space is sacred,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've done a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
to repair and build and heal. And you're not going to come in here being reckless and shit, you know? So I need to ask those questions now, and I do because I want to protect this sacred place. I want to protect this piece that I've built here.
Yeah. And same, that's a really good illustration in terms of where you are in your career journey and the levels of looking at jobs. And I would also say, even before, I wasn't even woke enough to see the relationship behavior, the pattern of the behavior. I even had people outside, like family members, other friends, be like, "Is you you sure this person is your friend?
Yeah.
Like, is this
That's
is
usually how it goes. Too,
y'all
right?
always this is always the dynamic? Like, do you notice that?" And I spent so much time being like, well, just defending it. But
I'm a good person.
at a certain point, it's just back to what I was saying before. You have to be able to choose yourself a little bit more, not in the spirit of selfishness, but in the spirit of, we are both individuals in this relationship. We both deserve to have our needs met. Right? What you need is not more important than what I need. There will be moments where we'll have to compromise, probably. Like, okay, this thing that I thought I really wanted, maybe I'll adjust so that we can both have a little bit of what we want instead of like 100% of what we want. But at the end of, essentially, we both we both deserve to show up here and feel full and supported and loved and whole. And I, in my past, spent some time just in relationships where it's like, I'm going to go on my way to be here for this one person. And I do remember, I remember distinctly the point where it started to feel laborious to me, where it started to feel like, gosh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
This actually is not lighting me up in the way that maybe it once would. Or, and I would say maybe that's another way to navigate it, y'all, is like, pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to your energy. If something is sucking the energy out of you, if it's not lighting you up, that is a very clear indicator that there is something there for you to pay attention to. That doesn't necessarily mean discard, but is there a way for you to bring it back to where you are feeling fulfilled in some type of way? Pay attention to your spirit, y'all. It will not lead you astray. You got to check, like, your gut that's a real thing. So if you're feeling friction, if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, every time I'm avoiding it because I actually don't really want to do it. That's all procrastination is. Like, you just don't want to do it. If it is just like you're dreading it and like you just need to recharge after the thing, if it is not lighting you up, if it's not filling your tank, then what are we doing here? What are we doing it for?
I guess that's why I don't have an issue with the how selfishness feels, right? How the negative connotation sometimes that goes along with it. I don't have a problem with that. I think that there's a certain amount of selfishness that we all need to have in order to be able to show up as our best selves and to be in relationship with anybody else. If I meet someone who doesn't have a certain degree of selfishness and is not able to verbalize that, there is time that I take for myself, or I've taken some time and I've looked at this relationship and I've done this internal work with myself. And that has informed the way that I'm showing up here and what I am requiring in relationship. Then I would have questions, right? So I think we all deserve to have a certain amount of selfishness. a certain amount of
I
work
wouldn't
that we
even
do.
say it's selfishness. It's a boundary. We all
That too.
deserve
Mm-hmm.
boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not giving you all of me for you to suck up and use. Like, this is the boundary. This is the portion of me that you give.
Folks, stay sucking up the set out.
All right. What's next?
We've talked a little bit about it, but I mean, I guess we're asking, what have you learned about maintaining healthy relationships?
We done already said it. I don't know if there's anything else that we could say there. Like, you just have to know what you need. You're going to have to be comfortable, be brave and courageous enough to take steps to get what you need, whether that's a conversation, whether that's setting a boundary, whether if it's just different behavior on your part. You know, it is what it is.
I think for me, it is the biggest take home for me is that that goalpost can move.
That's true.
You know, healthy relationships look like the ability to be fluid and to be able to move and to be able to understand that, there are environmental factors, there are personal issues, there are all these different things that cause us to change the way that we do business sometimes. And healthy relationships are relationships that are flexible and adaptable and able to shift as they need to meet the goal. And if my relationship is so planted and rooted in me always having to be the same, or you always having to be the same, or this thing for me, then I don't know that it is a healthy relationship.
It's not, because there's no growth there. Even if you think about your relationship with your parents, like, they parent you one way as a child, parent you differently as you age as a teenager, and hopefully by the time you get to an adult, they're parenting you or not parenting you. They're like, they go from being a manager to a consultant, right, in your life.
Child, keep praying. This one of mine.
And so that's the case with even a marriage, right? Yeah. We are not the same as we were when we got married. And we should, if we are going to sustain our relationship, then we have to evolve, adapt, relearn. And I think there is something really beautiful about friendships, people who've been friends since they were, like kids. And you said something recently that I've latched onto. Low maintenance, high quality relationships, meaning like there is still space for me to show up as who I am and who I'm becoming, and vice versa. When we get together, we just pick right back up where we left off. But there is no expectation, no requirement for me to jump through hoops, be at every single thing. I can't even barely talk on the phone these days. Actually, I can't. I don't have like conversations with my friends on the phone for real. I barely, like, I'm struggling to find the time to talk to my mom every single day on the phone. And so life just looks different. And so I'm really, really valuing my friendships these days that are just, you're good. I got a lot of stuff going on too. And when we connect, and usually it's in person, it's just like, oh, I needed this.
Yeah.
And absolutely. It fills me up until the next time.
No doubt. So, what does this moment feel like? What is your music? What's your soundtrack?
Immediately, I thought of Lauryn Hill, X Factor. The gain some reciprocity line. As soon as we decided like this would be the conversation, that dropped into my spirit. So even though that song is really about a romantic relationship, I think it still applies across the board. So care for me. Listen, X Factor.
No doubt.
It's his. You got anything?
Yeah. So for me, from old school hip hop, MC Breed, Ain't No Future in Your Frontin'.
That's MC Breed?
MC Breed.
Oh, see, I don't even know the name. Breed with the D.
Right.
Why did I think it was? I don't know why I thought it was like Easy-E or something.
Child, good day. MC Breed, Ain't No Future in Your Front. When we don't show up as our authentic selves and be able to have these difficult conversations and have the courage to reposition and move folk around when they can't show up, have those difficult conversations, we ain't doing nothing but fronting. And often it is to our detriment. I am
Not
just
often,
saying that it's always it's to our detriment, but or it is to our deficit. We end up being in deficit in relationships because we're just fronting and acting, like one thing or this little bit that you're able to give is enough when it's not. And I can't be elevated. So ain't no future in your fronting, shop. MC Breed. MC Breeze. Who is that? Who even is that?
Check our description for the link to our Spotify playlist, Music for the Moment. We've got some bangers on there. Dope playlist.
Come on, some bangers.
And speaking of our description and everywhere that we are, we're all over the internet at this point. So we thank you for for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, you made it this far, we would love for you to like, follow, subscribe. So click that like button, click that follow, click that subscribe. You'll get notifications every time we drop an episode every 2 weeks. And rate us. Let us know what you think. Yeah. Or if you want to leave us a comment, let us know what you would love to chat about. We just love to connect. We love to engage with you. We also have got something new. We have a Thrive guide that is in our description as well, with some curated tips from some of our licensed professionals that we've had on the show. We've got, the corresponding episode that the topic is on. We've got some reflection prompts for you to kind of do the work and begin taking next steps towards more richer well-being yourself. So click the link in our description to grab that. And like we always say, life will always present us with a haze, but we have everything that we need within us to navigate through it.
And the greatest part for us is that you're not alone. Join us next time. We appreciate you joining us this time. Just know we're going to take this journey together.
That's right.
We appreciate y'all. Peace.
Holla.